I mean, we're treating Alex Jones like a credible voice here. We're treating Tucker Carlson like a credible voice.
I don't consider Alex Jones a credible voice, but there are people you travel the country and talk to Trump voters who do.
Okay, so let's just say you're right, and some people listen to them. Who do you think they listen to more? Those people or President Donald Trump? I know what the polling says.
In this video, far-right MAGA supporter and pundit Scott Jennings is clearly losing control as the MAGA movement starts to break apart, with big names like Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson now speaking out against Donald Trump. And we are going to watch clips of Scott Jennings appearing with John King and Karen Finney, where they talk about this growing chaos inside the MAGA base, and I also share my own thoughts. So let's watch into it together.
Tonight, a MAGA revolt growing over the president's war with Iran, even as President Trump claims victory with a shaky ceasefire deal. Listen right here for yourself.
Iran has basically gotten everything it wants in the agreement because Trump was desperate to open the Strait of Hormuz. This is a huge black eye to the United States. This thing, 39 days in, is a total and complete disaster, and we have been right about it.
I am sick of this shit. I'm sick of it. Can't he just behave like a normal human? I mean, honestly, like the president, 3D chess, shut up. Shut up about that shit. You don't threaten to wipe out an entire civilization. We're talking about civilians just casually in a social media post.
Those people who are in direct contact with the president need to say, no, I'll resign. I'll do whatever I can do legally to stop this because this is insane. And if given the order, I'm not carrying it out.
I'm confused. I can't believe we went to this war. When we started bombing Iran, I was like, this can't be true. Supposedly, they're trying to stop the terrorists.
That's crazy, though, if you're the terrorist. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you want to stop them, stand in front of the mirror.
My political sources tonight, Karen Finney, former senior advisor to Hillary Clinton, and Scott Jennings, the former senior advisor to Senator Mitch McConnell. Thank you for being here. Scott, you may not agree with all those voices, but there are a lot of Trump voters out in America who listen to them. Maybe not all of them, but some listen to Tucker, some listen to Megyn, some listen to Joe Rogan, some still listen to Alex Jones. This is going to hurt.
I mean, we're treating Alex Jones like a credible voice here. We're treating Tucker Carlson like a credible voice.
I don't consider Alex Jones a credible voice, but there are people you travel the country and talk to Trump voters who do.
Okay, so let's just say you're right, and some people listen to them. Who do you think they listen to more? Those people or President Donald Trump? I know what the polling says, and I know what my instincts tell me is that Donald Trump runs the party, he runs the country, not the podcasters. They're welcome to have opinions. I don't begrudge anybody having an opinion, and you could have a different opinion than Donald Trump. But I know who has more influence over the Republican Party and the conservative movement, and there's no doubt about it. And there has never been any doubt about it, really, all that much for the last 10 years. So their opinions are fine, but the person in charge right now was in charge, is in charge, and will be in charge until he leaves office.
Mike Cernovich, another MAGA influencer, one of the most popular on X, tweeted today, Trump ran on idealism. Good people trusted him. They feel deeply betrayed. I hear it every day. Just another lonely voice to you? Or
Well, look, okay, I can also play I hear people saying every day that this is exactly what they voted for. They voted for a commander-in-chief to restore American strength on the world stage. They voted for a commander-in-chief to keep Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. They voted for a commander-in-chief who would do what the 7 previous presidents would not do, and that's deal with these people with a firm hand. So I hear things too. And again, everybody's welcome to an opinion. I don't begrudge anybody their opinion. But you can't deny that Donald Trump has always been a hawk on Iran. He's always said he would never permit them to get a nuclear weapon, and he's taking those actions to prevent that right now. That is the direction he is doing, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone because he's always been very clear that he believes they're fanatics, and he believes they cannot have a nuclear weapon, and he believes that dealing with them and cajoling them, they don't understand that language. They only understand the language of strength.
I want to come back to some of that, but I want to let you into the conversation. So when you watch all that as a Democrat, you're celebrating. And I get your point. I get your point. I get your pushback. However, if you look at the polling, there's a slice of the MAGA base that doesn't like this. If you look at recent elections, the Republicans clearly have an enthusiasm and a turnout problem going back to 2025. And you can say special election, but there have been dozens plus now, and the Democrats
30.
have been winning. So you're not going to, you don't care to talk to them. But is there something Democrats should be saying to any Trump voter who might have just even paused or like, where are we?
Sure. But two things. Number one, I think more influential than Donald Trump, and this goes to your question, is what people see and feel in their own lives every day. So when you go to the gas pump, if you're a farmer, we've had stories on all day on CNN today about the strain that farmers are feeling and the fear that they have when they're trying to plant for next year. So I think people trust their own pocketbooks. For Democrats, I think there's two pieces to this. One, speak to the anxiety, but talk about what we would do. One of the ways Democrats made inroads in the 2006 midterms. I happened to be at the DNC. I'm sure Scott remembers those midterms quite well.
I do. I was at the we called them the salad days there at Bush White House.
But it was a time, one of the things we were able to do, George Bush had, as you know, dramatically dropped in terms of people's faith in his ability around the Iraq War. Democrats didn't just have our critique about the Iraq War. We had ideas about what we would do differently and a positive agenda that spoke to the economic concerns. That's what Democrats need to do now is, speak to the concerns, because there are people, let's talk about this. There are people who feel like the president doesn't need to be using vulgarity when you're talking about, bombing people out of existence, who feel like that's not actually what I voted for, and it's a war of choice that is actually harming people here at home. So speak to that and encourage the fact that that's what people are feeling, but then give them something else.
I suspect you're going to say, there you go again, to borrow an old term. But we mentioned all those other voices in the Trump ecosystem, MAGA ecosystem. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the former congresswoman, Candace Owens, the podcaster who's out there on many things, they say Trump should be removed.
You can have her, by the way.
They say Trump should be removed. The 25th Amendment, saying his threat to end Iran civilization, to wipe a civilization.
I want to pause here for a moment because the mental gymnastics and spin coming from Scott Jennings are actually pretty revealing. Because sure, you can try to frame Alex Jones as some fringe figure, and yeah, he is a complete lunatic. But Tucker Carlson, not that long ago, was basically MAGA royalty. He was very close to Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and even Trump's sons. He showed up at the convention and spoke there. So for Scott Jennings to now act like Tucker Carlson is just some fringe voice that nobody pays attention to is simply not accurate. Now, at the same time, Scott Jennings is always going to defend Donald Trump no matter what, even if he ends up being the last person on earth doing it. But what I think we are going to see a few years from now, once Donald Trump is out of power, is Scott Jennings and many of these other pundits completely rewriting history. When Trump leaves office in disgrace with extremely low approval ratings, Scott Jennings is going to pretend like he never backed him in the first place and will quickly move on to whoever becomes the next Republican leader. And honestly, I hope networks like CNN pull out the old clips and remind people of exactly where they stood, because all of them are going to act like they were never defending Donald Trump, even though Scott Jennings has been one of the biggest defenders out there. And when it comes to people like Megyn Kelly, Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, and others, they were also backing Donald Trump just a few months ago and doing everything possible to help him get reelected. So when Megyn Kelly now says things like, "Why can't he act like a normal human being?" it makes no sense because he has always been like this. He did not suddenly change overnight. So where was that criticism a year ago? Her calculation was to stay aligned with MAGA. She fully committed to it because she could not succeed as a traditional journalist, so she leaned into that audience. But now that MAGA appears to be falling apart, figures like Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, and others can clearly see that things are going downhill and they want out, and they are already starting to position themselves as if they never truly supported Donald Trump, or that they were somehow ahead of everyone else. But the reality is they all played a role in helping him rise while fully knowing who he was. It is not like he suddenly became extreme. He has always been that way. So at some point, there has to be accountability, and metaphorically speaking, there should be no easy escape route for any of them, because they all helped elevate him, and now they do not get to simply walk it back just because public opinion has turned against him.
You think there's a single average Republican voter out there, if you went out and knocked on their door tonight and said, yes or no, should we let podcasters and Democrats remove Donald Trump by the 25th Amendment?
Let me flip
You'd
it.
be thrown off of every porch in America.
Let me flip it just a little bit, because I agree with you that the overwhelming majority of Trump voters will listen to Trump. I don't think there's any question. However, Trump has benefited enormously from having an echo chamber, having allies that include all of those people. Right. Part of his success has been because of that. They've brought him into unconventional places in the electorate. They've brought out people who didn't vote before. They've helped him. You're shaking your head. You're one of them. You have a podcast now. It helps. It helps if people are echoing the president and saying he's right.
I don't deny.
If they have influence with his voters, it cannot help when they say he's wrong.
I don't deny the usefulness of having surrogates and allies, but I think you're oversubscribing their importance and undersubscribing the importance of Trump himself. And I think, frankly, the only reason we're playing them on our air right now is because they're useful to a narrative. We don't consider these people to be credible at any other time until they are attacking Donald Trump. Otherwise, we call them crazy. Otherwise, we call them crazy.
No,
that's
I'm
not
being
fair.
careful. I'm being very careful about it because I said I don't view Alex Jones as credible. I don't view Tucker Carlson as credible, or
lot
as
of
a
people-
conservative, anyways. However, I do travel the country and talk to a lot of Trump voters who listen to these people. And I respect them and their choices. And they do listen to them. I'm not saying they side with them, but they do.
I'm not disagreeing they listen. I'm not
credibility.
disagreeing they listen. But again, I would just say listening to someone and taking their word for everything over Donald Trump every day. I just
let me ask you a question. I'm sorry, Karen.
Yeah.
Then I might yield you the rest of the conversation. I'm not being fair at the moment. But you earlier used the term fanatics, talking about the Iranians, which is a term that people have used for a long time. Marjorie Taylor Greene's point, actually, is that the president said wipe out a civilization. When the Iranians say wipe out Israel, when the Iranians say wipe out the Jews, we say they are extremist fanatics. So why is it okay when the president of the United States says it?
I think the president was speaking to them in terms and stark language that he thought would get their attention. And let's just draw a line between that moment when we didn't think a deal could be had until later that day when all of a sudden they were at the table and interested in possibly dealing. So I'm not going to take away the space of the commander in chief to deal with these people in the way that he thinks is best. And now we have the possibility of a deal. I understand it's ragged around the edges and there's, things going on, but he's dealing with them in the way. And by the way, he's always had pretty good instincts on Iran. He had them since they took power. He had them in his first term. And I think a lot of Republicans recognize that.
So once again, there is a massive amount of spin coming from Scott Jennings here, because not long ago, Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene were absolutely seen as credible voices within MAGA and even among mainstream Republicans. And the fact that Tucker Carlson was invited to speak at the Republican convention alone proves he was considered influential and respected inside those circles. So for Scott Jennings to now act like these figures were never taken seriously is clearly revisionist history. But that is what he does. He operates like a propagandist, pushing misinformation and misleading narratives on CNN almost daily. And I will say this clearly as my own prediction right here. Give it about 3 years, once Donald Trump is out of the picture and they have moved on to someone like J.D. Vance or maybe Marco Rubio or whoever becomes the next face of the party, Scott Jennings is going to completely distance himself and act like Donald Trump was never even on his radar, like he barely knew who he was. Just watch how quickly that shift happens, because the moment Trump is no longer politically useful, they will drop him instantly. So now I want to hear from you. What do you think about all of this? Do you agree with what Scott Jennings is saying on CNN? Is there actually a real split happening inside MAGA? Or is this all being blown out of proportion? And at the end of the day, when you look at figures like Megyn Kelly, Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, the question becomes whether they were ever truly credible within MAGA or if they are now being pushed aside by the same people who once supported them. So I want to know where you stand on this entire discussion. Let me know what you think about in the comment. Make sure to like and subscribe for more.